Guys, it's Mama Dawn. I am a single mom. This channel is about everything my single mom life entails. But for the Christmas season, for Vlogmas, I have started doing a little series about my life up in Alaska. I lived in Alaska for 5 years, and where I lived was a Yup'ik Eskimo village. Today, I wanted to hop on and talk to you guys about the 12 most important things I learned from Yup'ik culture while I spent 5 years in a Yup'ik village. Let's just give you guys a little bit of a backstory. I moved out to a Yup'ik village on the Yukon River in Western Alaska when I was 18. I spent 5 years there. I fostered native tribal youth through the tribe there, very integrated into the culture, still have tons of friends from the villages in Western Alaska. I have friends who are both Athabascan and Yup'ik. That I really integrated myself into and really got to know and spoke a little bit of the language and ate a lot of the food and just had so many friends in was the Yup'ik culture. And I had like the unique privilege of living out there year round. A lot of the white people who go out to Yup'ik villages, because it is super remote and you're like giving up pretty much all the luxuries that typical Americans get. You don't have McDonald's, you don't have Walmart, you don't have shopping malls, you don't have paved roads or stoplights. Like you really are out in rural Alaska at that point. You're in like true, like, I don't know how to put this, but like, it's what most like middle class Americans in the continental US envision of like a native lifestyle. Like you truly are in that when you're in rural Alaska in native villages. They still subsistence hunt, they still subsistence fish, they still sew fur. Like they're very integrated into their culture still. So it's a really neat experience, and I was just like beyond blown away with the kindness of the Yup'ik people. Like they truly are like a culture of people who are so willing to like accept outsiders and bring you in. Maybe there's racism, but they have virtually no xenophobia. Like they are just so welcoming and so happy to have anyone come out and try to learn about their culture, and they're so willing to teach you. So without further ado, these are the 12 things that I learned from Yup'ik culture that have truly changed my life. The thing you'll notice about Yup'ik culture if you ever go out to an Eskimo village is that everyone needs to be included, and this is so ingrained in their culture from just thousands of years of living in one of the most extreme environments in the world, you know, tundra, very cold Alaska, and you're living there in like true wilderness for thousands of years. So very tough people, but also people who had to have a really strong communal aspect in order to survive as long as they did. So it's like almost genetically ingrained in these people. And I know it's a cultural influence, but it just seems like that's who they are as people, is like, it's just so you need to include everyone. You see children playing, like if a child has mental disabilities, physical disabilities, is younger, is older, it doesn't matter, they're involved. All children are together playing. There is no outsider. There is no idea of leaving someone out. When you go to sporting events, every single child gets equal playtime. Like it is so ingrained in their culture that people be treated equally. That is just a part of who they are. Like everyone needs to be included. And that's something that I always felt like growing up. I got bullied. I was the outsider kid. So I was especially empathetic to the idea that I felt everyone should be included. And I tried to be that person, but then to live in a community of people who had that idea was just so uplifting and amazing. And it truly is this idea like no one's an outsider. We don't kick anyone out. And truly a beautiful aspect of Yup'ik culture. The second one was a tough one for me to kind of swallow at first, and it is to forgive. Always just forgive. They are the most forgiving people in the world. If you do them wrong, the next time they see you, they're going to shake your hand and they're going to move on with life. Like they are just the type of people who actively try not to hold grudges. And again, it's probably one of those things that are like ingrained in their culture because that's how they survived for as long as they could. You couldn't be mad at people and survive in one of the harshest environments in the world. You had to rely on everyone. They had to rely on you. And just little disruptions like that probably wouldn't be a very good thing. So they are the type of people who forgive very easily, but it also means they forgive in the face of tragedy. They forgive in the face of assault. They forgive in the face of murder. Like I have seen people whose family members' lives were taken by another person, and their initial response is extreme sadness and grief, and then they move on to the place of, but we have to move on and accept this person and still forgive them. And I haven't seen that in any other culture. I haven't really seen it stressed, but it's so just, it was hard for me at first. I'm like, you have the right to hold grudges, but after you kind of get integrated into the culture and see how it creates a universal acceptance of people that like, you almost feel free. You're like, I can be myself. I can have days where I'm really sad, or I'm really upset, or I'm really angry, or I can have a moment where I didn't do something right and I made a mistake, but you know that everyone around you is going to love you anyways. And that's a really beautiful thing. It's kind of more of a little fun one, but it goes into like natural folklore, and that is that the world, the earth knows your intentions, animals know your intentions. So you never speak of that you are going out to hunt. Like you would never say, I'm going to go hunt a animal, because that would bring bad luck. Animals would know your intention. They're not going to give themselves to you, essentially. So you never say that you're going to hunt. The world knows your intentions. You don't vocalize those. You're heard. Like you're always heard. It's that the world is always listening to you. So be careful of what you say, be careful of what you speak, and make sure that you're not saying something that could backfire on you in a way. Like it's that awareness of your words have a lot of meaning and they carry a lot of weight and they can be heard beyond what you think they can. So animals know your intentions, don't speak them. One is this idea of give what you can. And in Yup'ik culture, they have these things called potlatches. It's essentially like a coming of age ceremony where they have a dance for their child and the family just gives away everything, gives away gifts, gives away food. Like people come from villages all around to receive gifts from this family celebrating their child coming of age. But it is this idea that you selflessly can celebrate, like by celebrating, it's not you getting, like your child doesn't get things, it's they give everything. Like you give everything to the people who have come to celebrate you. And it is this just idea of like the best thing you can do is not to accept, it's not to be greedy, it's to give and to share. Thing is stressed so much in Yup'ik culture. It is, I think it's mind-boggling for people who aren't used to it, because in the continental US it's so fast-paced. But up in Yup'ik villages, patience is so stressed. You're waiting in line, you don't complain about waiting in line. Doesn't matter how long it's taking, you don't complain. You don't complain about waiting for anything. Yup'ik people are the most patient people in the world. Like when we are waiting at school events to just get in, or if I was waiting at the post office and they were super backed up, just everyone was just silently like happily waiting. Patience is just like the true virtue out there. Like you wait, you don't complain about waiting. It's just a part of life. And they really stress the importance of just happily waiting, being patient, being happy to be patient. And it's something that's still instilled into me to this day. Like people get mad when we're like in traffic jams and stuff. And I'm just like, hey, we're being patient and it's fun. It's to use everything. Like Yup'ik people do not have this idea of throwing things away. Like they just don't. It's not a part of the culture out there. You're not going to take something to the landfill unless it is absolutely useless. And white teachers and white construction workers will come out and something will break, like a vacuum or a tool of some kind, and they will throw it away. And immediately you will see the locals going, and I started to pick up on this too, going and getting that thing and fixing it. Because they're like, you don't just throw something away, like you make it work. And they are like the universal fixer-uppers. Like they can fix anything. If you give them some time and some duct tape and some glue, they'll figure out a way to make it work. Something I've kind of already stressed, but it's that greed does not benefit society. In fact, I think the worst thing you can be in Yup'ik culture is greedy. Like above all else, you don't be greedy. You don't take more than you need. And that probably came down to like back in the day, if you took more food than you needed, or you took more firewood than you needed, then another family went hungry or another family went cold. So in order to make sure everyone was surviving, you had to share. You could not be greedy. Next thing is kind of funny, but it's that it's never too cold for ice cream. So it's called Eskimo ice cream by some, or what the actual like Yup'ik word is a Gouda. It is fish and animal fat and berries mixed together, and it's served chilled or frozen, and it is so good. Like to this day, I just, in the wintertime, that's what I want. I want Eskimo ice cream. I want a cold snack, but it's just this fatty, sweet food that because it has the animal fat in it, it's like it warms you up to eat it because it's so caloric. And it's just really funny that it really is like ice cream is universally loved by everyone in the world. Doesn't matter where you are, you're going to come up here with your own kind of ice cream. And a gudok is top notch. One is that the best way that you can honor a past loved one is to continue their legacy. And you'll see this in so many aspects of Yup'ik culture. Like they so treasure people who have passed away and they want to make sure that their lives are not forgotten. And I think a lot of other cultures, like we're so quick to push death aside. We don't want to think about it. We make jokes about it even, but we don't want to dwell on the grief of death. Whereas Yup'ik people are like, they had this amazing life. We want to make sure that this life continues on. So you'll see they'll have like yearly feasts for people who have passed away and invite everyone to feast at their home in celebration of the person who passed, even though it's been a year or 2 or 5 or 10 since that person passed. You will see people names their children after someone who passed away. And it doesn't have to be someone who's related to them, just someone in their community who passed away recently. There will be 3 or 4 children who are born after that who get that person's name to make sure that that person's legacy lived on. And they actually have this idea, like you'll see like ladies come up to a baby and be like, oh my gosh, my grandma, it's so nice to see my grandma. And they'll like, you know, see how the child is acting like the grandma who passed away. They'll be like, oh my gosh, my grandma used to love that food. It's so silly that my grandma now loves the food, because the little baby has the grandmother's name. So it's just like this universal legacy of people just living on through generations. And I think that's really beautiful and just such an amazing way to honor someone's life. Like it's not so much that you're like sad about the death. They do grieve, but it's more like we want to make sure so desperately that you didn't live in vain, that you get to have a legacy that lives on. And that really is something that's integrated in Yup'ik culture. Next one is more for women, but this happened with so many women who I talked to, and they would talk about miscarriages as children. It wasn't, I had a miscarriage. It was, I had a child who passed away, and they were so willing to be so open about the grieving process. And it wasn't, you didn't get pregnant and have a miscarriage. It's, you got pregnant and lost a child. It felt like such a validating and beautiful thing that I wish all of America would start to like accept, that you do truly, people just don't view it as losing a child when it's early in the pregnancy. But Yup'ik culture understands like the love and just the excitement that you have for this baby, no matter if it's been in your womb for 2 days or 9 months, it doesn't matter. And you still experience that same loss when you lose that child. So when you ask many of the women how many children they'll have, they'll be like, I have 5 that are alive, but I've had 2 pass away. And usually they'll kind of explain like it was a miscarriage, but they have 2 more children who they just didn't get to have with them in the world right now. And I think that that's like such a validating and beautiful thing that I wish more women would feel open about, because it wasn't like they weren't seeking out sympathy. They weren't you know, trying to make you feel bad for them that they had a miscarriage or like to put on some sob story. It was truly just like, we had these kids and we don't have them anymore, but they're still a part of us. They're still a part of our family. Like we carried them and we lost them. And I think that that is just something more the world needs to catch on with. I think it's kind of a funny one, but in Yup'ik culture, it was never like bad to be called fat or chunky or chubby. Like it wasn't an insult. It was more like just fat keeps you warm. You know, fat is an adjective, not a bad thing. And you should have a little bit of fat on you. Like as you get older, it's completely normal to get fatter, and it just means that you are more apt to survive in a cold environment. So it was kind of refreshing to be in a place where being fat wasn't a bad thing and being called fat wasn't a bad thing. I saved for last on purpose because it is my favorite aspect of Yup'ik culture, and it's just such a unique thing that to this day I find myself wanting more of. And it's that silence isn't awkward unless you make it awkward. And I was raised in the continental US in the Midwest, where if you are with people, you got to be having that small talk. If you're sitting there silently, super awkward, weird. Like, what are you doing not talking? But in Yup'ik culture, that's just what they did. If you didn't have to talk if you didn't want to. If you wanted to, cool, talk away. But if you don't want to, there's nothing weird about that. You can come over to our house and you can sit down. You don't have to say a word to us. That's not weird. You just don't feel like talking. I would have people come into my home and I would like give them a cup of coffee. And for like the first year, I was like, what is going on? But they just sit there silently and just kind of chill and look around. And that was it. They just wanted to be in my company. And now I'm like, that's so nice. Like, I wish we didn't have the social pressure to talk if we didn't want to. That we could just go over and just silently spend time with someone and that could be enough. And that silence isn't like mean. It isn't rude to be silent. It's actually really nice to feel that comfortable with someone that you can simply be silent. And that's enough. It's okay to just sit in someone's company and not have to converse and not have to use words or come up with small talk or gossip or whatever it is. Sometimes just being with someone is the nicest thing that you can do. And I think a lot more introverts would feel more comfortable in social situations because I'm pretty introverted myself, if we didn't have that pressure to have to talk, to have to come up with conversation, if we could just sit silently with people, if we didn't have to like put on our listening ears and try really hard to be a part of a social situation. If simply like being with people was a more acceptable way of being with people, I think a lot more people would want to be with people. That was a lot of times to say be with people, but it's just a part of Yup'ik culture I so dearly miss. Like, I just loved going over to someone's house and sitting down even to eat or to just be there and their children are playing and running around and we're just sitting, because that was enough. And that was, it was beautiful. And it's something that I would love to find here. I need some friends who will just let me come and sit, because sometimes that's all you really want to do. You don't want to talk. You just want to be around people. And why should words have to be a part of that? Was something that I really learned in Yup'ik culture, is that words don't have to be a part of appreciating someone's company. These are the 12 things that I learned while spending 5 years in a Yup'ik Eskimo village in rural Alaska. I've said this a million times, but it truly was just such an important and beautiful part of my life. And I treasure everything that I learned and experienced out there. And there's so much of Yup'ik culture that I just find myself still like yearning for today, or parts of me that I know I grew into because I experienced a different culture, and it just made me such a like beautiful and better person. If you guys would like to see other videos about my Alaskan life and my experience living on the tundra, I'll leave a playlist in the description box below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.